My name is Viola. I was 14 years old when I left home. At that age, I wasn't thinking about the years ahead. I wasn't thinking about education gaps, adulthood, or how difficult it would be to rebuild my life later. I only knew one thing. I wanted to live. I started walking. On my way to town, people would stop and ask me the obvious question. What is a young girl doing out here alone at this hour? I always had an answer ready. I lied. I told people whatever I thought would convince them not to send me back home. Sometimes I found shelter in people's homes. Sometimes I stayed for a few days and left. And in my mind, there was one destination. Nairobi. I believed that if I kept moving, I would eventually get there. I thought it might take me a year. I didn't know that the journey would take several years and leave me with an education gap that I would struggle to fill later in life. Eventually, I reached Mumias in Western Kenya. I had no proper home. Sometimes I slept on the streets. Sometimes strangers gave me somewhere to stay. Then I found work. One of my first jobs was at a battery charging shop. I also did domestic work, helping with household chores and looking after livestock. Looking back, something still troubles me. Why were adults employing a 14-year-old girl? But they didn't know the whole truth. I had lied about my age and my circumstances because I was determined not to go home. For a while, I had food. I had somewhere to sleep. And most importantly, I felt free. Until the treatment became something I could no longer tolerate. I had left home because I wanted to escape certain things. I wasn't prepared to find another version of them somewhere else. So I left again. And once again, the street became my home. Then I met a woman who came from Nyanza to sell fish at the market in Mumias. She offered me another place to stay and work. I went with her. I stayed with that family for more than 6 months. Then I asked for my salary. The money wasn't given to me. So I left. I settled in another nearby town. Street again. Strangers again. Temporary shelters. Small jobs. And whenever I felt that someone was trying to control me or hold me back, I ran. I wasn't looking for luxury. I was looking for freedom. Eventually, I reached Mtaa. But by then, I was tired. I had spent years moving from one place to another, yet Nairobi was still somewhere in the back of my mind. I believed that if I could reach Nairobi, I had connections that could help me return to school and find somewhere stable to live. So I started thinking about the journey again. At one point, I approached law enforcement officers and told them I was lost and wanted to go back home. Instead of simply putting me on my way, I spent several days in custody, perhaps close to a week. Later, a group of officers were traveling toward Kisumu, and I was escorted with them. When we reached Kisumu, I was warned not to be seen wandering around the streets. They told me that if they found me still roaming around Kisumu, I could face consequences. But there was another problem. I didn't have enough money to continue traveling all the way to Nairobi. So instead of continuing toward Nairobi, I made another decision. I went back toward Kakamega. And once again, I started from almost nothing. I slept on the streets. I begged when I needed to. I did odd jobs. I slowly learned my way around the town. Then I found work again. And something unexpected happened. I became happy. I made friends. Real friends. People who became like family. I rented a house. I changed jobs. I experienced relationships, social life, and the freedom I had been searching for since I was 14. For a while, I forgot about Nairobi. I thought perhaps this was my life now. Then life changed again. Several difficult things happened. My father came to see me. Then I lost someone very dear to me back home. I returned for the funeral. When I came back to Kakamega, the difficulties continued. But this time, I had a different destination in mind. I wanted to finish what I had started. Nairobi. I saved every coin I could. Eventually, I had enough for a bus ticket. And finally, I arrived in Nairobi. But something had changed. I was no longer 14. I was an adult. The possibility of returning to school was still there. The people who could have helped me were still there. But some of the opportunities available to me as a child were no longer available in the same way. I couldn't turn the clock backwards. And perhaps that was the hardest lesson of all. I had spent years searching for freedom. But somewhere along the way, that freedom had cost me something I couldn't easily replace. Time. I had to begin another journey. Not running away this time, but rebuilding. Finding my direction. And pursuing the person I believed I was created to become. My name is Viola. This story has plenty of pain. Plenty of suffering. Plenty of difficult moments and humiliations that I cannot even begin to describe in this version. What you have heard is only the lighter version of my story, shared for educational purposes. Because some experiences are too painful to put into a short video. But I am sharing this story because I want teenagers to understand something I wish I had understood at 14. Sometimes home can feel unbearable. Sometimes you may believe that running away is the only way to find freedom. But leaving home without a safe plan can expose a young person to new dangers, interrupt education, and create struggles that can follow them for years. This story is one of many. There are many young people whose lives have been changed by leaving home too early, and many stories that we may never hear. So if you are a teenager struggling at home, don't disappear without telling someone safe. Find a trusted adult, teacher, relative, counselor, community worker, or another responsible person who can help you find a safer way forward. And for parents, guardians, and adults, perhaps Viola's story leaves us with another question. When a child runs away, do we only ask where they are going? Or do we stop and ask what made them leave? Because sometimes a young person isn't running toward an exciting life. They are simply running away from something they don't know how to handle. And sometimes, the first step toward saving a young person isn't judging them. It is listening. My name is Viola. And this is my story.